Hi, and welcome to Real Talk. I'm Audrey George with Audrey George Consulting, and I'm thrilled to introduce you to our co-host today, Jaime Barajas. Jaime is a biomedical technician at Agility, and he's a recent graduate at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And Dr. Kristine Lombardozzi is here with us as our special guest, and I'm going to have to read her bio because there's so many pieces. She's a trauma surgeon at the Spartanburg Regional Medical Center. She's the assistant professor at Medical University of South Carolina. And she's a surgical director for the Academy for Surgical Coaching. And she's also a surgical and executive coach. Welcome to you both, and thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
So let's just jump right in. And Kristine, if we could start with you, could you share kind of your background? Who are you in the world, and how did you get to what you're doing now?
So I am a Midwest girl, grew up and educated in the Midwest, and went to medical school, trained and did my surgical training still in the Midwest, and have been working here in South Carolina for about the past 20 years. Have had various medical educational roles from residents, surgical fellows, medical students, and have really been able to lean into my passion for helping grow other people. And I think my executive coaching was just a natural extension of that, and been able to combine the three things I love the most in education, surgery, and coaching.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Jaime, and how about you? Share a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so I am a recent graduate from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I went to college to study biomedical engineering with a concentration in biomechanics, and now I am a biomedical technician that works for Agility, which is a company that really grew during COVID as a management service for medical equipment. Because what was happening a lot of the time during COVID was some hospitals were lacking in certain equipment, especially ventilators. And so what Agility was able to do is distribute those equipment devices between hospitals efficiently.
That's great. And so I'm so excited to have you on. I'm so excited to have both of you, of course. But Jaime, kind of as a new grad and as a new employee, I think you're at this point that, like, I'm sure Kristine remembers, like I remember well, kind of starting your first job, right? It's such this big momentous occasion. And I'm sure you have so many questions. And I love that kind of getting you in front of a leader like Kristine, who's also in the medical field. But even if she weren't, I promise you, she's got a wealth of wisdom to share. And so I like this kind of opportunity to get you this feedback early on in your career and to get some of your questions answered. So let's start actually with you and kind of how you think about and look at leadership, Jaime. Like, what are you looking for in a leader? How do you think about leadership? How do you define leadership?
I think the one great thing about a leader is that they're usually someone who has experienced what the people that they're directing have gone through. And I, as a surgeon and someone in the medical field, I believe that you hold those qualities that I'm looking for. And one thing to me was the difficult decision of whether I wanted to continue my education or go directly into the industry, because I think the one thing that held me back was the amount of financial aid that I could find to continue going to school. I was lucky enough to be an Evans Scholar and go through college on a full tuition scholarship. So I guess my first question to you is, what drove you to continue your education throughout med school and becoming a surgeon? Was becoming a surgeon always the end goal, or was it something else before that?
I think it's interesting. I initially did not want to be a doctor, but for reasons I didn't want to go to school for that long. And I think one of the early lessons I learned is, you are going to be working for the rest of your adult life, and you should be working at something that you love. And when I looked at where my true sort of passion and where my sense of impact was, it was with helping and caring for other people. And that when I looked at medical school or continuing my training in that light, the extra time just makes more sense. And so it was easier for me to undertake, the extra years of school and then the 5 extra years of training, because it was getting me towards the thing that I loved to do.
So begin with the end in mind, right? So you had a true north that you were focused on. Is that accurate?
I did, although not tightly defined. I don't think I knew that I wanted to be a trauma surgeon. I think I've had what I thought was my north, but I think being open-minded and trying on everything as a sort of with all interest, be all in and try out where you are, see if it fits. And if it does, great, move forward. If it doesn't, then try something else. But be all in where you are.
I love that advice for you early on, Jaime.
Do you know how many careers, or do you remember how many different careers that you tried before you became a surgeon or went to medical school to be a surgeon?
Yeah, I initially thought I wanted to be an accountant, and I found that it was too rigid, too defined. Then I wanted to be an engineer, and then I just found out that I wasn't good at physics. And so, I had always loved medicine or emergency medicine or pre-hospital medicine. And I think when I looked around and said, what do I love and what are my aptitudes? Biology and chemistry seemed to be where my aptitude lied. And I thought that medicine would have been a natural extension. So that was all happening sort of during college. So lots of changes.
Yeah, Jaime, if it helps, I started college pre-med because I wanted to open free clinics. You know me, so you know that that makes sense. Then I thought I wanted to teach. Then I thought I wanted to be a counselor. Then I thought I wanted to, I eventually graduated with an undergraduate in psychology, and kind of over time ended up more in kind of the youth ministry, education, youth development space. And so,
And if I can offer what I'm hearing both from myself and from Audrey is that, you're trying on the things that interest you and the things that you're good at, and eventually they all coalesce, but maybe not in the way that you originally thought they would, but those doors don't shut, they just adapt.
Yeah, so I've only worked for Agility. I just started my job January 6th. So I've only been with the company for 4 months. What is a good time frame you would say to continue trying a job?
Boy, I do think that you have really got to invest for a good, I would think, and again, I'm not in the business world, so take this for what it is, but if you're not there for a couple of years of really sort of being all in with your company, I don't know that you can really truly know what's possible until you've immersed yourself for a solid period of time. Audrey, do you have a perspective about timing like that?
yeah, I wouldn't say like I wouldn't have a specific time frame to suggest, but I would say Kristine, I agree with your take on kind of you don't know yet what you don't know, right? Like at this point, and so kind of trying on all the hats and all the different things that you can try within the organization that you already are in, and so looking for ways to kind of excel at what you're doing, so then you can kind of ask for and hopefully take on more responsibility and learn the other pieces, right? Agility is a big company. There's a lot of different products that you could be involved in. There's a lot of different services that you could be involved in. There's a lot of ways that you could learn there. So I would take advantage of all of those, right? I'd be looking for the opportunities to continue to learn. But I think it's important to remember, like, you've got to prove excellence first, right? Like, I know how smart you are and kind of how invested you are and what a hard worker you are. Your company doesn't know that yet. They're going to figure it out pretty quickly, but you've got to prove yourself, right? And then kind of when you do that, all kinds of doors get to open to you and you get to help figure out where you want to go as you take on new responsibilities.
Kristine, are there any maybe indicators that you know when you were trying out different careers that you really understood, wow, this isn't for me, this isn't what I want to do?
I think first of all, relying a little bit on your internal instincts. I think you know yourself, your core values. When something aligns or doesn't align, I think you get a sense of that. And so that's one signpost. But I would encourage sort of the working through that. Is this just right now? Is this situation going to change? And again, try it on to the best of your ability to be sort of totally immersed in the role that you've chosen. And then if and when you get to a time post where you think, look, I've gained all the skills that I think I can gain here, and it's not a mismatch, that's a time then to start maybe exploring. where you might want to pivot to next, or what skills you might want to sort of dive into next. Not necessarily what's the next job, but where else do I need to grow to keep moving forward?
Yeah, your next step might end up being going back to school, right? I love you actually being in the job. I love you being in the marketplace first and working before you went to grad school if you do decide to go. Because sometimes what we think we want to go to school for changes once we get into the workplace and actually experience what that job might be like. So getting a taste of what it is to be a biomedical technician, right, is pretty important right now. That will help you decide if school's next, if a different role is next. I think one thing to look for, and Kristine, I'm really interested in your take on kind of developing people. This is something I know you to be exceptional at. But Jaime, one thing I'd be looking for is what development opportunities does your company offer? And kind of take full advantage of those, right? Like what resources do you have available to you? What trainings can you take internally? What courses might you be able to take, certifications or such that the company would fund? Even if it's an online course, right? You can still be learning, developing, growing, trying to kind of figure out what direction you do want to take next, what hat you want to try on next. Kristine, I'd love to hear from you just about your take on developing rising leaders. Like, how do you approach that? How do you think about that? What should Jaime be looking for?
So I think anytime I'm working with someone who's either transitioning into a new role or just has a new role, I think what I would encourage them to think of themselves in their skill set, sort of in their leadership skills, and not so much where you are, but where would you like to be in 5 years? Or what competency would you like to make sure that you show growth and development in? And then curate your experiences or say yes to the opportunities that your company offers you to grow those competencies. So you're growing as a person, you're growing as a professional, and the optics of what the leaders around you see is that you are growth forward, you're process improvement minded, you're controlling your optics and letting them see in you what you want to put forward.
So as a biomed technician, I find it overwhelming with the opportunities that I can, take my career into specializing in a certain type of device, or maybe wanting to go deeper with my relationship with patients, because I don't work as direct with patients currently. And so because there's so many opportunities, how could I potentially narrow down the things that I would like to take on as my skills and my specialties?
I think the first thing would be to understand sort of the breadth of what your company offers. Is there an opportunity to deep dive into a subsegment of the technology that you work with, or a certain patient population that you may be serving that holds a special place for you? I think there's also room outside of work to really become invested in the sort of greater healthcare milieu. Whether or not that's through community engagement, it's through your company's community engagement, or the other ways that your company engages the healthcare systems that you work with. I think there's opportunities to explore all of those and then decide where you want to deep dive.
Yeah, I would add look for opportunities to get on projects, right? You don't have to change a job to get a new experience, right? You can look for an opportunity to say, hey, I've gotten to be very proficient in my work. I'm knocking out what I'm supposed to do in a shorter amount of time now. Can I pick up? I see that we're working on X or Y. Can I get in on that? Right? And kind of set yourself up as someone that wants to contribute and continuously learn. And then I'd also look for opportunities to volunteer to get some of the experience that you might like as well, right? If you're seeing all these opportunities in a hospital setting, I'm sure there are volunteer roles in that hospital setting that would let you test some things out. This is back to trying on the hats, like Kristine mentioned at the beginning, because so much of this is, I remember being your age. I remember being overwhelmed. I remember seeing all the things and wanting to do and try all the things and kind of not having a clue of how I was going to do all those by the time I was 25, because I had to have it figured out. But right, like you put all this pressure
Yeah.
on yourself. I just remember this so well. But you've got nothing but time. So keep that in mind. You're literally 4 months into your career. You've got nothing but years and decades ahead of you to work all this out. A lot of us have pivoted through over time, right? After short periods of time, after long periods of time. I've got friends who have had decades long careers in like completely different industries. I have a friend who worked in accounting for 15 years and then switched. Now she's been a teacher for almost 20 years, right? Like there's nothing but time, is my point. And so find opportunities to test things that you think you're interested in and play them out, but not in a way that makes you sign up for this big intensive switch, right? Or this
Yeah.
big intensive commitment, because sometimes it's not what you think it is. And so get in and test it out.
I think I'd look at it as, again, you're developing pieces of yourself or skills or competencies, and there's
Right.
lots of venues to do that in. Some of them are going to be through your work. Some of them are going to be opportunities that present themselves, like Audrey said, for projects, and your answer should always be yes. Dive in. But I think back to what Audrey was saying, that we are all pieces of what we enjoy and what we've developed, and it may coalesce in a way that's very unexpected. But if you sort of do the parallel growth until you see, hey, this is the clear path that is becoming evident, and that's where my deep dive goes.
So advice for me that I would like to hear from you. Is there any community engagement that you remember specifically that you got to test the waters before you decided to become a doctor?
So I think I spent a lot of time volunteering inside a hospital. I think it's important. There's multiple different ways to do that. There's volunteerism, there's shadowing, as a way to sort of see all the different ways that healthcare can impact people. And I'm not just talking about being a physician. Look at pre-hospital, look at, when I think of biomedical engineering, I think of prosthetics, and I think of, the companies that support amputees and develop new technologies for them. So I think there's lots of exploration opportunities, volunteerism, and I think engaging inside what's readily around you inside your community.
Yeah, Jaime, I would say think about what you are striving for. What's your true north? How do you really want to kind of leave your mark? And there's going to be plenty of ways to do that. But once you can identify ultimately where you're trying to go, then you just want to always be testing back to, am I working my way towards that goal? Right? For me, as cliche as it might sound, I wanted to help people, right? I wanted to have an impact. And I've done that in a few different ways over the years. First, I did it as a nonprofit leader, right? I was in nonprofit work for 30 years. And then I pivoted to run my own business now that helps other companies create better workplaces. And so that's having an impact on people in a different way. But they both work for me and they both have really fed me in ways that I feel very honored and privileged to kind of be a part of people's lives in this way. And so my point is there's lots of paths and you'll find them, but you got to know what you're going towards. And so I would kind of think about that. You know, what is it that you see yourself doing? What legacy would you like to leave right at the end of your career? You would like to look back and say what about yourself?
Yeah, I think it's oftentimes also hard to leave your legacy or your mark on the world by yourself. It's really hard to do anything on your own.
Well
So
said.
my next question would be, it's really important the people you surround yourself with. So how did you find the right people to surround yourself with to grow in your career?
Sort of, again, just like testing and trying out skills and roles, I think you need to test and try out different people, different groups. And I think, we in medicine, I think, naturally gravitate towards certain subspecialties because of how we think, because of our disposition, because of our need to see immediate efficacy or long-term progress, pace. And so I would say, look at and spend time with different kinds of people inside your company and inside your community. And which people do you just find a great alliance and alignment with? And that can help be a signpost to be, hey, that may be a direction for you to invest more time in. And I do think the more collaboration and the more just investigation and investment into curating people into your personal world is always a good time spent.
That's well said. And I think one of the things I learned over time is it's okay to let people go when they're not a fit for you anymore. We all grow and kind of change and develop in different ways. And sometimes our people are on the same path as us. And sometimes folks that we thought were our people kind of end up going in a different direction and we just don't really align anymore. And that's okay. That's just kind of how it goes. And that doesn't mean we don't still appreciate them and care for them. It's just maybe they're not in the inner circle anymore. We're going to say.
I think what that brought up for me was, that was part of how I knew accounting wasn't for me. That's how I knew engineering, other than my lack of aptitude, was the people that I enjoy spending time with, the people that share my passion and my values, also helped me to navigate that path and not only find medicine, but also find sort of where and in what specialty. So I see the same opportunities for you to do that, both inside your company and inside your community.
I love that, playing that out to kind of participating in the community as well, right? It's not just at work that we're going to find our people, right? It's in other places. Kristine, I was just asking Jaime to consider what he might want his legacy to be. When you think about your career, what do you hope your leadership legacy will be?
I am not sure that if I were sitting, in your shoes, if someone had asked me this question, that I would have had a good, complete picture of what impact I wanted to have. I knew that I wanted to have a tangible impact on improving people's lives. And I think I saw efficacy of that sort of inside medicine. But I think what I didn't appreciate is the kind of leader and people grower that I wanted to be. And so now, yes, I love the people that I touch and the lives that I can impact. But I think my greater legacy is going to be the people that I helped a little bit to grow into the people that they were going to become. And that's the kind of leader that I strive to be. And that is probably going to be the bigger legacy, surprisingly enough.
Was there any difficulty when realizing you couldn't help everyone? You can't solve everyone's problems. So what did you do to overcome that realization that you can't solve all the problems in the world?
Boy, I think there's some trial and error of trying to remain as optimistic, but realistic, and understanding when my optimism was taking more of a toll than I was going to be able to let it, and interfering with my ability to be present and effective with the people that I was taking care of. And I think looking at people as individuals and giving them all the agency and autonomy, and sort of trying to keep that positive focus with boundaries so that I am able to be effective in a certain area rather than trying to fix everything everywhere.
Yeah, Jaime, I laughed when you asked that question because I don't think I have let it go. I'm quite sure I have not, right? Like on a day-to-day basis, I can get my head around what I can actually accomplish. But on an overall basis, like, my sights are still pretty high. And so I might not even know exactly how, but I'm still gonna keep at it. So I don't know.
Yeah.
And that fuels me, that doesn't thwart me, right? That I think there's a way that could wear you down. But for me, it's just like, yeah, who else can I help today? What else can I do today? That's just kind of how I am. And it works for me. It might not work for everybody, but I enjoy just looking for like one more touch to have in a day somewhere, somehow.
I think ultimately continuing to keep faith in people and what they can do, no matter what you might see to the contrary, is really central to being able to keep that attitude of growth and impact long term.
Well said. Kristine, here's a question for you. When you were Jaime's age, like if you think about like 20-something-year-old Kristine, like what would you go back and tell her?
I think the first thing is slow down. I was very, very forward focused, like years ahead. And I think there's a lot of benefit for really living where you are and just investing and experiencing where you are. And yes, keeping your eye on the next 5 years, but not making the next 5 years the biggest goal in what you're trying to create on a day-to-day basis.
Couple of final questions I want to ask both of you. Jaime, we'll start with you. I know you're kind of brand new in your career here, but is there a piece of advice that you've gotten so far that has stuck with you, whether it was during school or since you started working?
Basically, I've learned that you don't always need to stay in the same spot. And I think that's the trouble that I'm having, is that I think it's easy for me to be comfortable in the same routine every day, but it's important to put myself outside of the boundaries of comfort.
Kristine, what's a piece of advice that you've been given that has really helped you over the years?
I think sort of playing off of what Jaime just said, I think the spaces we grow in are the spaces we're uncomfortable in. And so to try to lean in to at least one or two experiences that make you uncomfortable, because there's going to be growth there.
Yeah, if you're not a little bit uncomfortable, then you're doing it wrong, right?
Yeah.
I like that kind of not resting, not being too comfortable, because I think a lot of us could get in that space and feel good, right?
Mhm.
Like I'm cruising now, right? And then lose our edge, lose the opportunity to learn some more. Okay, so final question, Kristine, I'm gonna go to you first, and then Jaime, let's give you the last word. Is there a leadership mantra that you live by that you could share with others?
I think the biggest one I hold is that you cannot lead people you don't respect. And so I try to look at every person that I work with, even whether I'm their leader or I'm not, and appreciate what they bring to our environment and our workplace, because we can't do it without each other. And I try to very much respect the people around me.
Jaime, how about you? What about a mantra that you kind of live by?
Mantra I live by, especially in being revolving around healthcare, it's kind of a saying that I've loved for a really long time, is that you've never truly lived life until you've done something for someone who can't repay you. That is very important in the healthcare setting, and is kind of why I'm on the teeter-totter of whether I should go back to or go back to school to become a med student, because I want to help these people and not expect anything in return. And that's why I like being a biomed technician.
That's a great final word. We'll end there. Jaime, really appreciate you doing this so early in your career. Kristine, thank you for sharing your wisdom, and appreciate you both being here. Thanks so much.
Thank you. It's been wonderful.
Thank you, Audrey, for having me.